A very good afternoon, everybody. Today is the fourth day of our last season of presentations. Semester 4 students are making presentations on comparative literature in this session, and in the another session we will have presentations on translation studies. So in this live streaming session, we will have presentations by Stuti and Niyati on why comparative Indian literature. It will be followed by Hiral and Nanditaba, and they will speak on comparative literature in India. And then the third one will be by Anjali and Khushbu, and their presentation will be on comparative literature in India, an overview of its history. After that, we have by Riddhi and Jignesh, and their topic is what is comparative literature today. And finally, we will have by Bhavyang and Nidhi, and they will speak on comparative literature in the age of digital humanities, on possible futures for a discipline. So, these 5 presentations we are going to have in this slot. So, let me invite Stuti to start with the presentation.
Hello, good morning everyone. Today I'm going to presentations on contemporary literatures and translation study. Our topic is Why Comparatives Indian Literature by Sisir Kumar Das, presented by me and Niyati. Table of contents about the author. Second is the comparative Indian literature. Third is comparative Indian literatures by Amiya and citation. About the author, Sisir Kumar Das, 1936 to 2003, was a poet, playwright, translators, comparatist, and prolific scholars of Indian literature. He is considered by many as the
It's going live, and I will have to make comment with your names when live streaming is going on.
dawn of Indian literature's historiographers, almost single-handed. Das builds and integrated history of Indian literatures, composed in many languages, a task that had seemed to many important scholars of Indian literatures to be a historian's despair. His 3 volumes, among proposed then volume, A History of Indian Literature's Western's Impact, Indian Response, 1800s to 1910, Struggles for Freedoms, Trim's M's Tragedy, 1911 to 1956, from Courtly of Populars, 500s and 1399, is credited of having devised thoughts of absurd methods necessary for situating deserves Indian literature's culture in history. Apart from his another's uh, monumentals work in Das, scholarly is the multi-volume English writings of Rabindranath Tagore, edited by him. Despite his formal traditions in Bengal language and literature, Das was amongst the few who were instruments in shaping the disciplines of comparative literatures in India. Das once remarked have been trying to say his that compartmentalized literary education should be immediately done away with for a long time. Whether study of literatures of readings of literatures, call it whatever would remains incomplete if not approached comparative. It is like that old saying, what does he know of English who only English know. uh, the literatures department have irridates walls between literatures. New thoughts would start belonging only where this wall are started down. um, Comparative literature is the comparisons of literary work from more than one linguistic traditions, and therefore in order to make such a comparisons, a researcher must take a transactions and transcultural approach of analysis. Now I would like to call Niyati.
Comparative Indian Literature by Sisir Kumar Das. In the beginning of the century, some of the scholars tried upon the idea of an Indian literature, emphasizing the unity of themes and forms and attitudes between the different literatures produced in different Indian languages during the last 3,000 years. It discovers the essential threads of unity in two ways: um, multilingual and multireligious culture. Coming back to the nature of comparative literature as thought in India, the epigraph by Sisir Kumar Das states the pressing concern of relationships that exist between Indian literatures. It is also the comparatist need to move away from narrow geographical confines and move towards how literatures across the subcontinent are to be understood in their totality. For a country like India, which has a history of literary traditions between script and orature, new methods of teaching and reading were to be envisioned. While dealing with the formal elements that go into the making of any text in India, which shares a similarity with African situations in terms of oral, written, and indigenous sources. Identification of these methods as contours which aid in the reading of literature would apply. When speaking of literatures in the plural, the succeeding questions point towards the direction in which these literatures tend to inhabit a geopolitical location, otherwise termed a country which is demarcated by boundaries, social, religious, and linguistic. When reading any text, the value loaded term national, international, and indigenous prop up any student pursuing literature. Subdivisions, generic differences may occur, but identifying these differences and reading them as contours instead of straight lines is what comparative literature sets out to engage with. While questioning the idea of an Indian literature, he highlights the notion one attaches to the word Indian, which could in itself be a pluralistic outlook of life, wherein the concept of Indian literature as inherently comparative may be considered. According to Das, the necessity of evolving a framework when two distinct languages or cultures encountered was inevitable. Das states in this regard Arabic, Japanese with Chinese, and Indians with the literatures of Europe. All these contexts have resulted in certain changes, at times marginal, and at times quite profound and pervasive in the literary activities of the people involved, and have necessitated an enlargement of critical perspective. Das states how Warren Hastings, the first Governor General of India, in his introduction of Charles Wilkins' translation of Gita, advocated for a comparative study of the Gita and great European literature. I should not fear, he wrote, to place in opposition to the best French version of the most admired passages of Iliad and Odysseus, or the first and sixth books of our own Milton, highly as I venerate the latter, the English translation of the Mahabharata. Translation brought world renown to a number of regional writers. In the task of the translator, Walter Benjamin argues that translation does not conceal the original but allows it to shine through. For translation effectively ensures the survival of the text. Here, Das asserted how Indian scholars in the ancient period did not endeavor to explore such connections between the two languages. Das has a clear insight into this phenomenon that may be not owing to myopic or tendencies and the lack of a framework to place literatures from two linguistic roots. Das forgets to mention that were not appropriate frameworks to study identity politics that went beyond the frontiers of language in a country strongly informed by caste hierarchies and subjugation of women and the suppression of the LGBT. And even when literature shifted from nation basis to identity basis, it happened outside the discipline of comparative literature. And here I will like to call Stuti for engaging comparative literature in India by Amiya.
Comparative literatures in Indian by Amiya. In his article, Comparative Literatures in Indian, Amiya based his discussions on the fact that India has many language and literatures, thus representing.
Are you talking about second paper?
No, sir.
Which topic is it? You have to speak on Sisir Kumar Das by comparative Indian literature.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Then you are talking about Amiya Dev. You are referring to that or
Yes, sir.
Huh.
in the same article?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, continue.
India has many language and literature, thus representing an priori situations and conditions of deserting. He therefore argued that the speak of an Indian literatures in the singulars problematics. Nonetheless, Sisir Kumar Das also observed that to speak of Indian literatures in the plural is equally problematic. Such a characterizations, he argue, either overlook of obscure manufacture interlocutions and no, his articles compare the unity and the diversity. Thesis is identify the relationship between Indians community and difference as the prime site of comparative literatures in India. They also examine the research for common dominations and possible patterns of togetherness, and they underlines the locations and located Indian receptions as a aspect of interliterariness. It is Hardev perceives Indian literatures that is not as a fixed or determines entire, but as an ongoing and interliterary process. Indian language and literatures even in are making. Here is citations. Thank you.
will answer, or
Yes.
so then both of you can come to give the. So in your article you have referred to this. In the last part you are saying that comparative Indian literature in India. So this is from Sisir Kumar Das's article. In the last part, what I see here in the article is that in the recent article towards comparative Indian literature, Amiya Dev said something. So is that article referred or the other one? And in the citation of Sisir Kumar Das, if you see, it is Amiya Dev's towards comparative Indian literature. In the citations of that article. Are you getting the point? Because that is the second article that the next presenters are going to speak, which you mentioned. Is that one you have mentioned, or uh, in your citations? If I see, then citations obviously still have a problem also. And comparative literature India transcending boundaries, which Amiya Dev, that is not referred, or the article which you're talking in the last part, have you cited in your references? Which one? It should be with Dev, no? Dev D. It should be with D in the citation. But I don't see anything there with D. So the article which you are studying, it has that citation, but that is not in your article. No, your presentation. It is not present there. So which article you have referred? Okay, other questions? Who is asking other questions?
Niyati and Stuti, my question to you is, according to your article, what is comparative Indian literature?
Comparative Indian literature is introduced to us by Sisir Kumar Das, and it is the comparison of the literary text that linguistic tradition. Therefore, in order to make such a comparison, a researcher must take
Are you able to see yourself there?
Sir, here is the presentation.
StreamYard. Can you open StreamYard? If you don't need PPT, then the StreamYard page you can open. Is it there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so now you can stand properly. So both of you are in the focus of camera. Slightly, immediately you can move on one side.
Sudi, tu jangan mana jadi ni secara berperang.
Yeah, untuk satu.
Yes, hari hari tu. Okay. Yes. The approaches of analysis, the relationship between art and literature.
Proper focus.
Yes, sir.
Both of you, I am asking both of you.
Stuti.
તો પણ આમાં તો એ રીતનું જ દેખાય છે.
તો હું તો આ તો નજીક આવી જ નહીં. હવે okay. The relationship between art and literature is not new, and it is explored in many studies. And here we have some examples of the translation. We have Abhigyan Shakuntalam in our in Sanskrit language, and Sir William Jones translated it into English language.
My question is that, what is the role of translation in comparative studies in Indian literature on accordance of Sisir Kumar Das?
Translation study are essential in
You take when you ask questions.
Yes.
Ask. Okay.
Okay, so I'm repeating my questions. What is the role of translation in comparative studies in Indian literature on accordance of Sisir Das?
are essential in comparative literature. It is because through translation, literatures influence each other and people understandings other better.
Now, after making so many presentations, you should not be nervous coming here. હવે કઈ એવી નર્વસનેસ ના હોય પ્રેઝન્ટેશન આપના વખત તમે પ્રેઝન્ટેશન આપો છો પછી તો બધું ઇઝીલી યુ કેન મેનેજ એટલે હવે એમ ફર્સ્ટ સેમેસ્ટરમાં એમ લાગે કે તમે નર્વસ હશો તો હવે ચોથા સેમેસ્ટરના વિદ્યાર્થી નર્વસ હોય એ ન માની શકાય તો મ્યુટ કરવાનું અનમ્યુટ કરવાનું એ બધું યાદ રહેવું જ જોઈએ પેરેલલ થિંકિંગ કરવું જ પડે.
Is my screen visible? Okay. Yes. Okay. Is it now visible?
This login.
Okay. Okay, so myself Hiral Kashyap, and today me and Nanditaba Nanditaba Sarvaya, Nanditaba Chudasama is going to present Comparative Literature in India by Amiya. So First of all, Gujarati poet Umashankar Joshi, a supporter of the unity approach, was the first president of the Indian National Comparative Literature Association. And in this article, Comparative literature is in India. Amiya Dev bases in discussion on the fact that India has many languages and literature, thus representing an priori situation and conditions of diversity. He therefore argues that the speak of Indian literature in the singular is problematic. Nonetheless, they've also observed that the speak of Indian literature in this plural is equally problematic, such as a characterization. He urges either overlook obscure manifest international and affinities. His article compares the unity and diversity thesis and identifies the relation between Indian commonly and differences as the prime site of comparative literature in India. He surveys the current scholarly intellectual position on unity and diversity and look into the post-structuralist doubt on homogenization difference in the name of unity. They also examine the search of common denominator and the possible pattern of togetherness, and they've underlined the location and located inter-Indian reception and aspect of literariness in its they perceive, perceives Indian literature. That is not as a fixed of determinate entity, but as an ongoing and literary process. Indian literature is previous essays in 1961 and 1971 recorded a total 1652 languages, while the last census of 1981, some 22 spoken languages were recorded, excluding language of speakers by the Sahitya Academy for reason of their significance in literature. Hindi, Kannada, Konkani, Kashmiri, Maithili, Malayalam, Manipuri, Marathi, Nepali, Oriya, Punjabi, Rajasthani, Sanskrit, Sindhi, Tamil, and Telugu. So, comparative literature in India. In this article, comparative literature in India, Amiya Dev bases his discussion on the fact that India has many languages and literatures, thus represent an priori situation and condition of diversity. So, Richard Richard Perry mentioned that in studying comparative literature, you will consider literature from the different donors, location, and time periods simultaneously. Beyond that, comparative literature thinks across different disciplines like literature and music on literature and anthropology. Finally, comparative literature is also the de facto home of literary theory. Some consider the field to be concerned with the general makeup of literature itself or literariness. And we used to thinking in terms of different national literature units like Spanish, English, Russian, Japanese. That's why university department and subjects are divided, but it is also tied to various nationalist movement in the 19th and 20th centuries that were instead in showing among other things that our nation had own literary tradition to be studied and admired. Comparative literature emerged as a distinct discipline at the same time, serving an important role by working across boundaries. For instance, and you might study the genre of novels or poetry without having a sense of what a novel is than you would get from just looking at a single piece of national literature. The same goes for looking literature across time periods. Think of comparative literature as a buffet of the literary world. There is nothing say you can't have a bit of everything. This approach to comparative literature had led to notable examples like Eric's highly respected Mimes is the representation of reality in Western literature, written in 1946. This work looked at the way literature, despite everything, life examining texts ranging from Bible and Homer's Odyssey and Dante Carbonates and 20th century author like Marshall Proust and Virginia Woolf. So, Chaudhary said that Chaudhary was picking at the
inaugural function of the 3-day international research seminar titled Bharatiya Sahitya Chintan and Chunotiya at Guru Nanak Bhavan, Nagpur University campus of Amravati Road. History and challenges of languages like Hindi, Sanskrit, Urdu, Marathi, English, which contest to Indian literature will be discussed at the seminar over the next 2 days. So Chaudhary said, our culture has taught us to ask questions, and our literature is com- compilation of answer thus found. It is our culture to learn by asking question or having discussion at the arguments are part of upbringing. So for the further presentation, I would like to invite comparative literature in India. In Indian literature, in the singular, a vivid category, or we can say plural, in the 18th and 19th, Western Indologists were not interested in this question. For Indian literature, to them was mainly Sanskrit and extended at most to Pali and Sanskrit. We can say about this that our what we are speaking today, or what different languages we are having today, the earlier time was very diverse from it. We find the Vedas, the Upanishads, all those in the language of Sanskrit, and the Jain literature, the Buddhist literature were in Pali and Sanskrit language. So earlier it was like that. There are only three prominent languages, but today the system is very diverse. And for this, with an example of Shakuntala, William Jonas was oblivious of literatures in modern Indian languages, and non-Indian Indianists today too are more often than not uninterested in this question. Although they do not consider Sanskrit, Pali, or Prakrit as the only literature of India, these scholars are still single literature specialists. Similarly, literary histories written in India by Indian scholars also focused and still focus on single literature. Though the article of Amiya Dev focuses on this very idea that we are having that much of diversity in India, though we are fighting for a single language, or the singularity of language. Gurbhagat Singh, who has been discussing the notion of differential multilogue, he does not accept the idea of Indian literature as such, but opts for the designation of literatures produced in India. Further, he rejects the notion of Indian literature because the notion as such indulges and promotes a nationalist identity. So Gurbhagat Singh's view over this is slightly different of what other people are thinking. That he is focusing upon that if only one language will get the importance, it will not promote national identity to the people. In Indian literature, in singular form also, we have a vivid category and variety of languages. The another thing is Ejaz Ahmed's in his theory classes nations and literatures. He says about the Indian language that took the construct of a syndicated Indian literature that suggests an aggregate and unsatisfactory characterization of Indian literature. Ahmed also rules out the often argued analogy of Indian literature with what of European literature by arguing that the notion of European literature is at best an umbrella designation and at worst a pedagogical imposition, while Indian literature is classifiable and categorizable. So here the view of Ejaz Ahmed is that in other countries, in other nations, the language is there is one language and people confront to that language. But in India, we have unity in diversity. Though this article is contradicting with the singularity of diversity. So Amiya Dev is here had focused upon the review of all these scholars, and he makes a point that although we have diversity of languages, but we are not that much uh, we are not that much inclusive in our literature.
By this, Amiya Dev suggests that we should first look at ourselves and try to understand our own situation as thoroughly and as possible. Let us first give full shape to our own comparative literatures, and then we will formulate a comparative literature in general. And he also focuses on how the this Indian literature or comparative literature is focusing upon the development and integrity of India. It is recommended that we should first rely on our literature, on our culture, and it is very important to make necessary changes in the human nature. That what we are focusing upon, we are focusing upon the relationships, the formation of giving birth and death. So all these things are very important to consider the human nature. And by this, Amiya they conclude his article by this. Here are some references. Thank you.
Okay, so please put your questions in the chat also, YouTube chat link.
So my question is, can you give some examples of diversity and unity in Indian literature?
Yes.
As you can see the screen, when you are on the screen, at that time you unmute and then ask your question. Yes, Khushbu, now unmute and ask. Just remind me to make you a large scale available on the full screen when you have to ask the question.
Can you give some examples of diversity and unity in Indian literature?
Yes, so I can give one example of the languages. Like in the Indian currency, we have 15 of the 22 official languages of India, and they are like Bengali, Gujarati, Kannada, Urdu, Nepali, Punjabi, Sanskrit. So that can be the example of this.
My question is Nanditaba, the impact of comparative literature in India.
Yes, there is way more impact of comparative literature in India, because it focuses upon to the research to identify the similarities and differences between social cultures, and it focuses upon to give a full high contradicting similarities and differences between the nations, cultures, societies, and human behavior.
Okay, you have cited Chaudhary in your citation with reference to Times of India. So, is that from the article or somewhere else have you read about it? What was that full? Now, if I want to read that article, how can I read? Right now, you share a link in WhatsApp, but that is what is the purpose of citation. That is what we want to. Hmm. Hmm. But it should not be like that. In citation, there should be a link given. So that is what we have to learn, why citations are important. So when somebody is reading your research paper or your dissertation, they want to know what is this. So that is why that map is given. It is a map. It is a direction to go to that way. So you understand why citation. એના માટે આ કસરત છે આખી, કે એ જગ્યાએ મારે જવું હોય તો તમે તો ત્યાં ન હોય એમ કહેવા માટે કે આ કોપી કરીને પેસ્ટ કરો. You will not be there when somebody is reading your articles. So that's why everything is very clearly given there, so that there is no confusion. And if it is online, clickable link should be given in the citation so people can access. And you give a date also. So if I access after 3 years, for example, and link is not there, so then you can say that this is the date on which I accessed. It was there. Now it may not be there, because in website things keep on changing. So that is why people put date also, and which date you have access, that is also important. So practically we understand why in citation people try to put all the things with a kind of a particularity. Okay, who is the next now? If possible, slightly in advance put your question, so I can display the question on the screen when you are asking. At that time your question can be displayed. Also, if little bit by the end of the presentation, if you put your question, then I can make it available on the screen while you are speaking.
Hello, I'm Anjit Trivedi. I'm from Department of English.
Just a minute. You are free. You shared or not?
Yes, sir, I'm shared.
It's still not shared. Now we are seeing Google Classroom page.
Yes, sir. Just. Now my screen is visible.
DoE.
Okay, sir. Okay, today's presentation is given by me and Khushbu. Today's presentation is given by me and Khushbu. Our topic is comparative literature in India and overview of its history. Here is a abstract of this article. This article is talking about the overview of the trajectory of the comparative literature in India, focusing on the preliminary on the Department of Jadavpur University, where it began, and some of the extends to Department of the Modern Indian Languages and Literary Studies. In University of Delhi, where is later had a new beginning in that the engagement within the Indian literature. In Jadavpur University began with the legacy of the Rabindranath Tagore's speech about the world literature, and with the modern poets translator as its founder. And in abstract, we see the influence and the analogy of the studies cross-culture literary relations to the focus on the receptions and the transformations. And last few years of that, the comparative literature has taken a new perspective, engaging with the different areas of the culture knowledge, and particular those are related to marginalized space, along with the focus on recovering the new areas of the non-hierarchical literary relations. Now, here is a key point of this article: the beginning, the Indian literature of comparative Indian literature as a comparative literature, centers of comparative literature and studies, rectifying of the area of comparison, the research directions, the interface with the translation studies and cultural studies, the non-hierarchical connectivity. the in the beginning part the we in the beginning part we see about the Tagore and the Bose idea. The Tagore used the word talk about the Vishwa Sahitya means world literature, and started that the world was generally termed the comparative literature. His idea of the Vishwa Sahitya was a complex marked by the sense of a community of artists as a work building together. The identifies to that the word of literature. The notion of literature again was deeply embedded on a human relationship, and hence the aesthetic sense was linked with the sense of the human. And Bo's perspective of the comparative literature is the Bose was also well known for the translation, the translation of the Baudelaire, Heldorian, and that the Kalidas wrote in that the preface of that the translation of a less furious the mal, the translation of that the flower of evil. That is the intentions turning to the French poetry was move away from that the literary of the British, the colonial masters. While his introduction to the translation of the Kalidas Meghdootam, he wrote that he was essential to bring life the literature of ancient times in a particular translation, particular tradition, in order to make a part this contemporary. Now we further move from the Indian literature as a comparative literature. In between, we talk about the three university, the ICLA, Indian Comparative Literature Associated, the Delhi University of the Comparative Indian Literature Association in Delhi, and in Jadavpur University, the comparalistic dealing with that the Indian literature also necessary to had to look at that the interplay between that the mainstream, that the popular, the elite, and that the marginalized, and also to some extent so foreground intermedical perspective of that the different form of that exist together, and and that the composite manners, and the particularly in the earlier periods in which textual and the performative tradition exists simultaneously. And the department of the continues developing the teaching materials of the various aspect of the Indian literature from the comparative perspective, beginning from the language origins, manuscripts, cultures, performative traditional, along with the painting, scriptures, and architecture, the history of the print culture, and this question related to the modernity, that comparative literature studied the necessary, and to be the interdisciplinary was the highlighted by the pedagogy of the practicing in the department, and by according to T.S. Satyanand, developed the theory of scriptocentric, body-centric, and the phonocentric study of the text in the medieval period, leading a number of researchers in the department of continuities, and that the intervenues in the tradition that would again lead the pluralistic and epistemologies in the study of Indian literature and culture. And the third, we see the centers of the comparative literature. In the 1986, a new full-fledged department of the comparative literature was established, and the V. Narmad South Gujarat University in Surat, where focus was India literature in the Western India. In 1999, the department of the Dravidian comparative literature and philosophy was established in the Dravidian University, Kuppam. It must also be the mention that the comparative poetics as core areas of the comparative literature studies, and that the studies dissertations, particularly in the south, was taken up as a center area of the research by the Vishwanath Kaviraj Institute of the Comparative Literature and the Aesthetic in the Orissa. During this period, the National Association of the Comparative Literature came into being. One at the Jadavpur called Indian Comparative Literature Association, and the other in Delhi named the Comparative Indian Literature Association. The two named the two had the merged in the 1992. The Comparative Literature Association of the India was formed, which today has more than the thousand of the members in early years of that of association, and the large number of the creative writers and the perspective in that the conferences along with that the academic and the researcher each enriching horizon and the vision of the other. And here's a rectification of the area of comparison. Here some example of in the this part, the along with that, the Indian literature of that the Gabriel Garcia Marquez the 100 years of solitude became a part of the syllabus, of which few other texts in Latin America literature and then literature from African countries were included. As for the other areas of studies components, the department today hosts the Center of African, Latin American, and the Canadian studies, where some of the researcher work. The annual seminars are organized. A few like that the present author are the opinion that the given the relatively small number of the policy, and in that the attention from some of the key challenges in the comparative literature studies in India, the namely that the systematically the amalgamation of the data related and the Indian context and the analysis from the comparative perspective, and so perhaps the mapping of the intercultural relations with that among India's neighborhood in countries. The Bonds and the Woodwards were very popular in romanticism. They felt that they are the romanticism was the marked by inner strength and the serenity. The much of texts about that the angst of the romantic poet was viewed negatively. The love of that the sincerity and health went back the classical period and seems as important value in the tradition. Now, I further presentation, I would like to call Khushbu.
Thank you, Anjali. As we saw that, as Anjali has already told, that along with Indian literatures, Gabriel Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude became a part of the syllabus with a few other texts from Latin American literatures and the literatures from African countries included. So, the 100 Years of Solitude is a book by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and and this writer has won the Nobel Prize in Literature. And this novel is translated into more than 46 languages, in almost 46 languages, and it is the magnum opus in the world literature. And we can compare, in this novel there is magical realism, and in this we can compare this novel with The Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie. In both the novels we can find the magical realism. And if another example we can give, then it is of the Moby Dick by Herman Melville and Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes. Both Don Quixote is originally written in early modern Spanish language, and in this the character of Quixote became an archetype, and the word quixotic, used to mean the impractical pursuit of idealistic goal, entered common usage. And this is also the most translated book in the world. So, in both these novels, Moby Dick and Don Quixote, we can see that the main protagonists are trying to pursue something which is practically impossible, a utopian like situation, trying to achieve the impossible goals. And again, next examples we can see, then there is comparison of poets and different writers like Shelley and Byron are compared, and the former having introduced softness and sentimentality to Bengali poetry, and they were often praised for upholding human rights and liberty, in contrast to the imperialist poetry of Kipling. So, contemporary political needs then were linked with literary values, and this explained the contradictory tensions often found in the reception of Romanticism in Bengal. It must be mentioned that Shelley, the poet of revolt, began to a very positive reception when the independence movement gathered momentum. Then we have from reception studies, the focus gradually turned to cross-cultural reception where reciprocity and exchange among cultures were studied. For example, one tried to study the romantic movement from a larger perspective. So then it is a comparison that romanticism first developed in India or Europe. From Sanskrit, the text was translated into German, and again it came back to India, as if it was thought that romanticism came from European nations to India, but actually it was already translated from Sanskrit to German languages. Then we have reception studies, both along with vertical and horizontal lines, formed the next major area of focus. One studied, for instance, elements of ancient and medieval literature in modern texts, and also inter and interliterary relations, foregrounding impacts and responses. So while one studied Vedic, Upanishads, Buddhist, and Jain elements in modern texts, one looked at clusters of sermons by Buddha, Mahavira, and Nanak. So all these scriptures that we have, Upanishads, Veds, and all that, it is written in Sanskrit language, but it spread it all across the world, and there are many translators have translated from Sanskrit to English and European languages. So this way, the knowledge of this Sanskrit was spread all over the world through translations, and this we can practically observe in the T.S. Eliot's Wasteland and in other such texts. Then we have the introduction. Then we have certain more courses like cross-cultural literary transactions, where Rudyard Kipling's Kim and Rabindranath Tagore's Gora, they were also taken for the comparison. And literary transactions, one looked more precisely at the tradition of reason and rationalism in European and Indian literatures of 18th and 19th centuries. Then, the Department of English and Comparative Literary Studies at Saurashtra University, Rajkot, took up the theme of Indian Renaissance and translated several Indian authors into English, studied early travelogues from Western India to England, and in general published collections of theoretical discourses from the 19th century. Then we have many other various departments all over the India and later into the world, which where this field was widespreading across. Then, from a very different perspective, it was felt that stories, poems, and performance from oral traditions that were found most parts of the country had their own knowledge system that could provide valuable and sustainable alternatives to contemporary modern urban modes of life and living. In several cases also revealed certain cultural dynamics and value systems that were constantly replenishing mainstream expressive traditions. So certain folk tales and folklores, which are normally poems and bhajans and all that, we can say they are not recorded anywhere. They are known to few people only, 4 to 5 people. So if they die, then all the special literature, we can say, that is lost if it is not recorded or documented in any form. So the steps were taken to record all these things. And in this area also we can do the comparison of cultures and languages. Then second area in the Center for Advanced Studies was the interface between literatures of India and its neighboring countries. The first preliminary research in this area led to the links that suggested continuity and constant series of interaction between Asian cultures and communities since ancient times, and urgent need for work in this area in order to enter into meaningful dialogue with one another in Asian context and to uncover different parts of creative communication. Efforts towards this end led to an international conference on South-South dialogues with a large number of participants from Asian and European countries. So, various to study the culture of various countries, not only from one country but from India and Asian and other countries, to know more about the culture and diversity of all over the world. Then we have the projects. Many projects were undertaken. The Inter-Asian series on travelogues from Bengal to Asian countries and annotated bibliography that could provide an initial foundation for the study of interliterary relations was published. Then second project involved working on the image of Burma in Bengali and Oriya literature in the late 19th and early 20th century. Travel narratives and diaries, newspaper articles from old periodical excerpts from literature, and pictorial images of Burmese people in the India press were compiled. So all these things, diaries and newspaper articles, to study the culture of the various countries. Then we have interface with translation studies and cultural studies. It must be mentioned at this point that comparative literature in the country in the 21st century engaged with two other related fields of study. One was translation studies and the other was cultural studies. Translation studies covers different areas of literary studies. Histories of translation may be used to map literary relations, while analysis of acts of translation leads to the understanding of important characteristics of both the source and target literary and cultural systems. As for cultural studies, comparative literature has always engaged with different aspects of cultural studies, the most prominent being literature and its relation with different arts and other disciplines. For instance, a course in Delhi University takes up the theme of city and village in the Indian literature and goes into representation of habitants system. So where we compare the city and and the village. So what is the culture of city and what is the village of culture of the village? The difference is in the language, in the culture, in the habits, in their daily life, and all that. So to study the cultures and the accounts of travelers from Greece, China, Persia, and Portugal demonstrate the differences that exist at the levels of perception and ideological positions. Then we have, it is evident that comparative literature in country today has multifaceted goals and visions in accordance with historical needs, both local and planetary. As in the case of humanities and literary studies, the discipline is to engage with issues that would lead to enhancement of civilization gestures against forces that are divisive and constantly reduce the potential of human beings. In doing so, it is engaged in discovering new links and lines of non-hierarchical connectivity of what Kumkum Sangari in a recent article called co-construction, a process anchored in subtle and complex histories of translation, circulation, and extraction. And Comparative works with the knowledge that a lot remains to be done. So not everything is covered. This is a vast area. Although the job chances are less in this area, but many things are uncovered and still not, a lot needs to be explored. And there are lots of scopes for the research in this area. So the task of construction of literary histories in terms of literary relations among the neighboring regions and of larger wholes, one primary task of comparative literature today has perhaps yet to begin. In all its endeavors, however, the primary aim of some of the early architects of the discipline to nurture and foster creativity to continues as a subaltern force. These are citations. Thank you.
Okay, so my question to Khushbu and Anjali that how it comparative literature centers are developed in India.
The concept of comparative literature in India received an impetus from Rabindranath Tagore's lecture delivered on the subject when he was invited by National Council of European of Education in 1907. But the idea of comparative literature suggested by Das, a practicing comparatist, is different from the idea expressed by Tagore.
So I have a question that which types of area are covered by comparative literature?
Yes, Jignesh. The comparative literature covers the area of influence, analogy, thematology, translation study, and the and the art, the cultural arts, and within the translation studies, the comparative literature is not comparative study is not possible. Thank you.
Okay, so now the next pair of for the presentation. This is the fourth one now. No? We have and by the time he is setting the things, Jignesh and Riddhi are going to make presentation, and Nidhi and Bhavyang, they are going to ask questions. In case anybody else also, if you have a question, you can put it in the chat also. If you want to ask orally, then also you can ask, or you can put in chat also.
Shall I start, sir?
Yes, you share the screen.
Yes. First, let me share my screen. So I think my screen is visible for you. So let me start my presentation. So today me and Riddhi both are going to present an introduction what is comparative literature today by Susan Bassnett. So here is the table of contents. A brief sketch of Susan Bassnett, introduction, key arguments, analysis, and work cites. First, let we will see that a brief sketch of Susan Bassnett. So Edna Bassnett, FRSL, means a fellow of the Royal Society of Literature, is a translation theorist and scholar of comparative literature. She served as a vice chancellor at the University of Warwick for 10 years and taught in its Center for Translation and Comparative Cultural Study. And here is the point that which closed in 2009. So, further introduction. There have been various definition of comparative literature, which greatly varies from one scholar to another, but they all agree that it is one of the most modern literary science. Throughout the past of two decades, new critical theories such as gender-based criticism, translation studies, deconstruction, and Orientalism have changed approach to the literature and according to have had a profound impact on the work of comparists. Sooner or later, anyone who claims to be working in comparative literature has to try and answer the inevitable question, what is it? The simplest answer is that comparative literature involves the study of steps across the culture that is interdisciplinary and that is it concerned with the patterns of connection in literature across both time and pace. By Bassnett, page number 1. Everywhere there is a connection, everywhere there is a illustration, as a Matthew Arnold puts it. According to Susan Bassnett, everybody who is interested in books is on path or to comparative literature. We come upon Boccaccio while reading the Chaucer. Shakespeare's primary materials may be traced back to Latin, French, Spanish, and Italian. We can see how Baudelaire's affinity for Edgar Allan Poe influenced his own writing. Consider how many English authors learned from the great Russian writers of the 19th century. We may compare James Joyce's borrowing and leading to Italo Sevo. Clarice Lispector reminds us of Jean Rice, who in turn reminds us of Dujuna Bars and N.S. Nin. So our third point is key arguments. We will see. Comparative literature revolves around the study of literature outside the borders of one particular culture. The study of relation between the literature on the one hand and other area of human expression such as the philosophy on the other hand. Critics have also relate it to history as it examines the convergence of different literature and its historical aspects of influence. Considering that competitive literature is the essence of the history of literature beyond the scope of one culture or language. And for further, another argument is that West students of 1960 claimed that comparative literature could be put in a single boundaries for comparative literature study. But she says that there is no particular method used for claiming. Critics at the end of 20th century, in the age of postmodernism, still wrestle with the same question that were posed more than a century ago. So here is some question which are asked by some critics. What is the object of the study in comparative literature? How can comparison be the objective of anything? If individual literature have a canon, what might a comparative canon be? Fourth one is how can be a comparative select what to compare? And fifth is comparative literature discipline or is it simply as a field of study? And further, there was interesting news that there was a Muslim girls are wearing hijab, and at the counter argument, there are Hindu community are coming from the Bhagwa. So that was the one interesting news, and. As an example of who are doing research on this. So, Dr. Audrey Truske. Audrey Truske is a historian of South Asian and associate professor at Rugar University. Her work focus on Hindu-Muslim relation in South Asia, especially during Mughal Empire. She has been a frequent target of harassment by right-wing Hindu nationalists who accuse her of having prejudiced views on Hinduism and making offensive statements. A scholar reject the charges. And for further presentation, I would like to call Riddhi, but
Okay, so okay, thank you, Jignesh. So, as a Jignesh mentioned, that yeah, comparative mind is necessary to all of comparatives. So, now the key points in analysis. So, first the methodology of comparative literature, then crisis of comparative literature in the postmodern literature field, and third one is dynamic shifts in a comparative literature. Okay, so our main concept is analysis. So, what is comparative literature today? A comparative analysis involves a interdisciplinary study of texts across cultures, as it is concerned with connecting different work of literature across both time and space. Hence, it requires a moving beyond the boundaries of a single subject area to find out how text, author, or cultural context are related. Matthew Arnold propounded that no single literature is adequately comprehended except in connection to other literatures. So his argument is that everywhere there is a connection, everywhere there is a illustration. No single event, no single literature is adequately comprehended expect in relation to other events, to other literature. So, comparative literature is an inevitable stage in reading. To conduct a comparative analysis, you should sorry we have already read for different prominent writers. For instance, Chaucer, Shakespeare, Baudelaire, Poe, then Joyce. Reading extensively means that you will be able to move across any frontiers as noted by Goethe, through which you will be able to perceive culture differences. So Valek and Warren, he write in their book that comparative literature will make high demands on a linguistic proficiency of our scholars. It asks for a widening of perspectives, a separation of local and provincial sentimentals, not easy to achieve. So Valen and Verek also argue that literature is one, as art and humanity are one. It is an idealistic vision that recurs in aftermath of major international crises. So the focus is no longer comparative text and tracking pattern of influence. Besides, new theories emerge like structuralism, reconstruction, seminology, and psychologies. The Eurocentric cultural studies, comparative literature, which focus only on the ideal of universalism. The third world schools have turned to focus on the specificity of national literature and directly influence the rise of nationalism and the interest in cultural identity. The West started to be from without from a radical alternative perspective, and African, then Indian, and Caribbean comparatistic have refused the denial of their cultural and literary history. So the myth of other emerged and the concept of great literature has become questioned. Comparative literature has developed globally as a result of the mounting national consciousness of the need to move beyond the colonial legacy. Shakespeare in India represented the representative of colonial values, and thus it is not easy to treat his literature comparatively. Comparative literature, cross culture criticism, has lost ground in the West, and it is no longer a binary study as many comparists are approaching many challenges, and it is being compared to translation studies, so which are significantly important at time of great cultural changes. The long unresolved debate in on whether comparative literature is or is not a discipline in its own right. So, according to Ganesh Devi, comparative literature in India is related to the birth of modern Indian nationalism. He observed that comparative literature has been utilized to assert national cultural identity. There is no notion here that national literature and comparative literature are uh, it, and the argument is significant because it helps to remind us of the roots of the word comparative literature in Europe. So, a phrase that originally originated during a period of national conflicts when new limits were being established. So, the issue of national culture and identity was then debated throughout Europe and the United States. So, now let's sum up. So main question is that what is a translation studies contribution to comparative literature? So translation studies has progressed to the point that many people regard it as a distinct field in its own right. Work in linguistic, literary studies, history, anthropology, psychology, and sociology all contribute to translation studies. It makes the daring claim that translation is not a perpetual activity, but rather a key shaping agent for change in cultural history. So, translation has historically been claimed as a subcategory in comparative literature, although this assumption is currently being challenged. Scholars, including such Turi, then Hermans, Lambert, and others, have demonstrated that translation is especially important at time of tremendous cultural upheaval. According to Ivan Zohar, substantial translation activity occur when a civilization is in translation. However, when a culture feels it is a dominating, translation become less necessary. Wherever comparative literature inside the West is moving backward and translation study is going strength. So here is work cited, and thank you.
Yes. So who is going to ask questions? Let me find. Yeah. Okay.
So, hello, Riddhi. My question to you that why did the students in the 15th and 16th turn to the comparative literature?
Yes. So in 1950 and 1960s, highly graduated students in the West turned to comparative literature as a radical subject because that time it appeared to be transgressive and moving across the boundaries. So that's why. Thank you.
Hello, Jignesh. My question is that your accordance, what is comparative literature in today?
Yes, Bhavyang. So first, I want to tell you that we cannot define comparative literature because it has so many connections. If we can take any book, it must be across the culture. So we can say that comparative literature has so many connections. As Matthew Arnold said that everywhere there is a connection, everywhere there is a illustration. Thank you.
Okay, next.
Is screen visible? Okay. So hello everyone. It's loading, right? Is it? Okay. So hello everyone. Today we have a topic of the comparative literature in the age of digital humanities and the possible future for the discipline. So this is the article written by the Todd Presner. So today, me and Bhavyang are going to present about this particular topic. It is the information about us. And today we are going to present on paper number 208 comparative literature and translation studies. So, table of the content. What is comparative literature? What is digital humanities? Comparative literature in the age of digital humanities, comparative data study, comparative media study, comparative authorship and platform studies, conclusion and work citation. So, first, what is the comparative studies? So, according to Penn State University, founded in 1963, comparative literature study uh, publishes critical comparative essays on literature, culture, production, and the relationship between the aesthetic and political thoughts and history and philosophy of from the across the world. And now, what is digital humanities? So, according to Professor David Mbere, digital humanities are the leading edge of applying computer based technology in the humanities. Initially called the humanities computing, and the field has grown tremendously over the past 14 or so years. It originally focused on developing digital tools and creating of a archive and database for text and artwork and other materials. So now comparative literature in the age of digital humanities. So according to Todd Presner, after the 500 year of the print and the massive transformation in a society and culture that is unlisted, and we are in the midst of another watershed moment in the human history that is on a par with the invention of the printing press on a perhaps the discovery of the new world. So it is very important to see that now in the age of 21st century we are comparing in the field of digital humanities that we were going through the pandemic and we are learning how to deal with the digital tools. So it is one kind of a new thing in the comparative study that how to do comparative literature in the age of digital humanities. So key argument, it is this argument is given by Todd's Prisoner that why, for example, were humanists foundations and universities conspicuously, even scandalous silent when Google won its book search a lawsuit and effective won the right to transfer copyright or orphan book to itself. Why were they silent when the likes of a Sony and Disney and essentially engineered the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, radically restricting the intellectual property, copyright, and sharing? And the manifesto is a call to humanists for a much deeper engagement with digital culture, production, publishing, access, and ownership. If new technologies are dominant and controlled by the corporator and the entertainment interest, how will our cultural legacy be rendered in a new media format? By whom and for whom? So in this presentation we are going to giving the example of comparative data study, comparative media study, and comparative authorship and platform studies. So in a modern time, comparative study and digital humanities become very interesting. Since so long, scholars make such an interesting thing for a comparison in literature, but in a digital era, people become a more advanced. And there are two kind of people. One is the digital immigrant and another is the digital native. So what is the difference between the digital immigrant and digital natives? So digital immigrants are slow learners. They are not habituated for multitasking. If we are giving a multitask to that person, they become very hesitant and frustrated, and they always prefer to hard copy. They always become to choose some text, original textbook or hard copy, while digital natives are habituated for the multitasking. They can arrange so many things simultaneously. They are habituated for the multitasking, and and they are also prefer digital tools like computer, laptop, mobile phones, and they are not habituated for going to the hard copy. So it will be a more advantages for them. So it is the one kind of advantages for the digital natives. So here is the one example that how digital is in age of a digital humanities comparative literature are going to study. So there is the one video. It is a very current video that we all know that Ukraine and Russia's war is very well known incidents among this time. It is very worldwide knownly things. So here I'm going to compare about that how one article and how one video is create impact on a particular person. So it is the article said it is the article about the war that Russia no rocket maro. So we just read that Russian rocket maro, but we are not interesting to go deeply. And if there is the one video, so we want to watch the whole video. So I'm playing this video here.
Tonight, a worsening humanitarian catastrophe in Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city.
Watching this
Today,
video,
the
we
scene
come
of
to know that how
street-to-street
the
combat
situation was critical there.
that left at least 9 people dead, including 3 children and dozens injured.
This is a residential area with no military objects.
And added to
Totally
mounting evidence that
disaster
Vladimir
had
Putin's
happened in
war has put
Ukraine.
civilians in the crosshairs. A school destroyed not far from the center of the city. Missile fragments inside a residential apartment building. Today, the International Criminal Court launching a probe for war crimes against at a children's clothing factory.
So you can watch that people are suffering and they are threatening that at which time they will go to die, because nothing is determined. Everywhere where is the war and everyone is getting
This
afraid.
will happen. with
So reading the
all
article
animals
and watching the
who will
video
run
is
through.
totally different
We are
thing. Watching a
actually
video
on the
create a
verge
great
of a
impact
large
on us,
humanitarian
and
crisis.
reading article
Of
is
most
not become
concern is
that
the
kind
sight
of
of cluster
popular among the
munitions,
people.
bombs that
But
open
this is
in
the
midair
comparison
and
that what
spray smaller bombs.
font and what
It's
the
clearly a
visual image
cluster
create
munition attack.
create an effect on us.
We think that cluster munitions should not be used at all.
They're banned by
And now for further, I would like to call Bhavyang.
tonight.
Okay, so printing form and now digital form. So we can say that in earlier time, all the things were in a printing form, and slowly and steadily the printing had started increasing, and all the things had started coming in the books. And now we can see that by only typing any book's name in the Google, then we can get many of the information. And we can see we are getting so many of the website, and then we will be confused that which website we should explore. And teaching offline, and now it is online. So we can see that before pandemic, teachers were seen only in the classroom, and students were also coming to the classroom. But after pandemic, we can see that due to online classes, students are also now preferring to join online classes. And we can see that some of the tuitions are also now arranged in the online mode. And teachers are also taking a high fees from them, and then also students are going there. And we can see there are many of the applications which are useful in this digital world. And then we can see the advertisement that while watching a YouTube video, we don't want to see the advertisement. Then also it we are getting that ad, and if we don't want that advertisement, then we have to get a membership or a premium. And here we can see the membership of Hotstar, then Amazon Prime, then Z5, then Wood Select, and then Netflix. They are giving opportunity that if we want to explore the OTT platform, then we need to have subscription. And if we don't have, then we will get ads. And then in dictionary, we can see that in earlier time, if we are not getting any words, then we used to prefer books. And we can see that how bulky books were there. And it was not easy task that we can find words from the dictionary. But due to digital humanities, we can see that all the things is now available in the phone. And by just typing in the Google Translator, we are able to get the meaning of that word in any of the language, like Italian, English, Spanish, Hindi, and all that. And will you prefer to read hard copy or a soft copy? So we can see that most of the time we will prefer to read in a hard copy. If we will not have s- if we will not prefer to have no, we will prefer to have soft copy, either hard copy. And then will you read a novel or a watch a movie? So if there will be available novel movie, then obviously we will go for a watching a movie, because that movie will only consume your 2 to 3 hours, and you will get the story that what is told in the novel. And if we read the novel, then it will be hard for us to read all the pages in a single day. And it will consume your time also. And don't and sir also as mentioned that just don't download all the things from the YouTube. You have to upload some things that is creative. And here we can see that that one movie Jund was released yesterday. And in the Telegram, we are able to download that movie. So it is one type of um, stealing of the things. And now we will see the example of the Namo tab, that government is giving this Namo tab to the to the college student. And by we know that in that in that tab they are not using they are using a cheap kind of machines, and the people don't know that how to use it in a proper way. And we can see that by Namo Wi-Fi they are just exploring to games and downloading the movies and not using it in an academic way. And here is a work citation. Thank you.
Um, Hello, Nidhi and Bhavyang. My question to you is that, as we all know that comparative studies and digital humanities are both a new field to us. So, hello, Nidhi and Bhavyang. My question to you is, sorry, sir. It is very new field to us. So, what will be the future of that field? Will people accept this both field area as positively, or will it be useful to us as they are useful now?
A very good question, Daya. You asked that it will be a good for us or bad for us, and it will be a taken further or not. So as we know that we also passed with the bad time pandemic. So this the digital humanities helps to us to overcome with these things, and with the help of this we are continuing with our studies, with our routine works. So it might be possible that in future it will be create a good impact and for us. And by digitalizing all the things, we can get a more scope for our studies. And yes, comparative study, while we are talking about comparative study in the field of a digital era, it will be also very good because it is our new topic. And as an English literature student, it will be a great opportunity for us to studying or doing a PhD on this. So it create a great scope for us, and especially as a student of literature, we are also seeing that it is a new kind of hope for us. Thank you.
Hello, Nidhi and Bhavyang. My question is how digital humanities is important in contemporary time.
As we can see that digital humanities is spreading very widely, and we can see that because of that people are getting a job, and they are getting an opportunity to explore in a many of the areas, like they can do the typing and all that type of data entry and all this work they can do, and they can earn salary by that.
Yeah, it was a good one, but see, what we have to keep in mind is the questions which are important. That what questions can be raised when we see all these things. So what uh, the writer Todd Presner is telling. Let me share this. Now that has to come significantly in our presentations or other things also, because the mistake that we make normally is that we study examples more, but how to locate that examples or what questions to ask to the examples, that is very very important. So on your slides, when we refer to this, and for example, let us do simple thing. Let us search how many times the word question is raised by Todd Presner. how many times he is using. So we find that 7 times he is using the word question. Now, then you can ask that how many times the word question has come in your slides, which is very important, because that was what we were time and again referring when we were talking about all these things. Even in our classroom discussion also, we were constantly trying to say this. Now, when I see questions, the first time it comes is this, that issues, authorship, access, collaboration, dissemination, media, platforms, scholarly legitimacy are not restricted to comparative literature, since they raise questions that are formed the methodological, disciplinary, and institutional foundations of a wide range of academic fields in humanities. Now, where is this language? This is that academic language which should keep on coming when we make presentations. Then again, these are questions that humanities must urgently ask and answer. What are those questions? So when we read there, it says that Google Book has won the lawsuit and transferred the copyright of orphaned books to itself. Then Sony and Disney did something with digital millennium copyright. So these are those things that are we asking the questions to what this private huge corporates like Disney or Google doing with the knowledge systems? Today, if they keep on controlling, tomorrow, if they will restrict the use, then what? So that is again the question that comes. And then the question that we need to confront in the fourth information age concerns the specificity of the digital medium vis-a-vis other media form. That is where you give the example. There is a newspaper here, there is this. But it has to begin with this question, or it has to end with this. That example should be supported with this question. As a way of addressing such questions, let me talk about this. That is what the writer is doing here. Then later on also, there are these questions like who is an author? What is a work? What constitutes a text, particularly in an environment in which any text is readerly and writerly by potentially anyone? Now see these words, readerly, writerly, by anyone. Barth, 1986 was asking all these questions. Today we have to address all these questions in a different way, in a digital era. Then this pursue quantitative questions such as statistical correlations, publishing histories, semantic analysis, as well as qualitative hermeneutical questions. So this is what is very important in this. Time and again we have referred to this idea that in cultural studies or in digital humanities, normally the research is not leading to a better thing because of this, that we are easily seeing the examples, but what kind of language to be used to articulate those examples, there somewhere we are failing in doing that. So in this article also examples are there, but that language of asking questions should not be missed out. In translation studies, in all other articles also, even in your dissertations also, you have to time and again keep on asking what questions are you addressing, what questions ultimately are you addressing in your research work. Now if you don't have an answer, then that is not the research work. So that has to come, which we have repeatedly discussed in our classroom interactions also. Okay, fine. So let us have this was the last one for this session, I think. Okay, fine. So let us end this session here, and we'll take a break of around 20 minutes, and then we will start our presentations on translation studies.